Surely mom and dad would prefer to live with me, especially since I'm the one giving them grandchildren. Emma, Karen said with a smug grin as she patted her growing belly, we're moving in here, so you and your husband should find somewhere else to live. Karen's words were delivered with such certainty that it was clear she expected a fight. Instead, I calmly replied, all right. Her satisfaction was obvious, but little did she know, I was secretly relieved that this might finally break the uncomfortable ties between us. My name is Emma, and I've been married to Scott for a few years. We've been struggling with infertility, a painful reality for someone like me, who used to work as a child care provider and has always loved children. When I discovered after our marriage that I might not be able to conceive, I was devastated. I even told Scott that if he regretted marrying someone who couldn't give him children, I would understand if he wanted a divorce. But Scott, ever the compassionate and loving partner, reassured me, saying, I didn't marry you just to have children. I married you because I love you. We'll face this challenge together. And so, we embarked on the journey of fertility treatments. Every day, I remind myself how fortunate I am to be married to such an incredible man. At first, I tried to juggle my job with the treatments, but it became overwhelming. Especially with the emotional roller coaster that came with it. I found myself crying at the sight of children, haunted by the thought that I might never have one of my own, not wanting to let my coworkers down, and remembering Scott's offer to support me if I chose to stay home. I decided to leave my job and focus on our fertility journey. Now, I'm a full-time housewife, devoting my energy to the treatment. Scott's younger sister, Karen, knows about our struggles, yet she's currently pregnant with her 5th child. Seeing her pregnant belly is a constant reminder of what I don't have, but Karen seems oblivious to my feelings. She frequently brings her 4 children to our home, expecting me to take care of them. Emma, you're a housewife now, right? Why don't you watch my kids for me? It's tough handling all of them on my own. You used to work in childcare, so it should be easy for you, right? She would say before leaving her kids with me while she went off for beauty treatments and manicures. When I told her it was too much, Karen would brush it off, saying, in a society where not enough people are having kids, I'm doing something admirable. You, who can't even have children, should be grateful to help out. It was definitely frustrating to look after someone else's kids without any compensation, even if it was my sister-in-law's children. Despite Karen's irritating attitude, I couldn't help but notice that her kids longed to spend time with their mother. Whenever they asked me, when is mom coming back? It broke my heart to answer, I'm not sure. Of course, I told Scott about Karen's habit of leaving her children with me while she indulged in beauty treatments. He was livid and called Karen to confront her, but she brushed it off, saying, Emma should be grateful to be around kids since she can't have any of her own. She used to work in childcare, so she likes kids. What's the big deal? Scott then reached out to Karen's husband, Rob, to address the situation. Unfortunately, Rob shared Karen's view, insisting, our kids seem to like Emma, and it's a huge help to us. If Emma gets pregnant, we won't ask her to watch them anymore. We've heard that might not happen, but until then, please help us out. Karen's exhausted from taking care of the kids, and since Emma's a housewife, she should be able to lend a hand. Scott reassured me that if Karen ever showed up again, I was free to send her away, but whenever she did come over, her 4 children would immediately dash to the back room without so much as a greeting. Karen would just drop them off, saying, well, take care of them today, and leave before I could even protest. One day, Karen unexpectedly came into our house. Normally, she just dropped the kids off and left, so I was surprised when she asked, when are you moving into the new house? Do you have any designs or anything? Scott and I were in the process of building a new duplex where we would live with his parents. The house was almost finished, and we were preparing to move soon. Despite knowing about my fertility issues, my in-laws had never uttered a single harsh word to me. In fact, my mother-in-law once said, there are plenty of happy families without children. Her kindness was a lifeline for me. As my in-laws were getting older and experiencing more aches and pains, Scott and I decided it was best to live together before they required full-time care, which led to the decision to build the duplex. It was the first time Karen had shown any interest in the duplex, and I was somewhat intrigued as I showed her the projected images and blueprints. Karen rarely visited her parents' house, but now she seemed curious about the home they would be living in. She asked about the number of rooms and how much sunlight the house received. and I assured her there were no issues. When I told her our moving date, she simply replied, "I see," and then left, leaving her children behind as usual. I had a bad feeling about this, but I didn't think much of it at the time. Eventually, Scott and I moved into the new duplex, and a few days later, my in-laws joined us. Living together was surprisingly smooth, and I felt truly fortunate to have such kind and understanding in-laws. One day, Karen showed up unexpectedly. As usual, she brought her 4 kids along, ushering them into the house without a second glance. She barely greeted anyone before turning to me and saying, "Hey, Emma, we need to talk." Meanwhile, my in-laws, who hadn't seen their grandchildren in a while, were quickly overwhelmed by the sudden influx of energetic kids. I was worried about how they'd manage, especially since they had recently complained about their aching backs. But Karen didn't seem to care. She pulled me aside into the hallway and then dropped a bombshell. "Hey, why don't you and Scott move out of this house?" What? I was completely taken aback, but Karen continued as if she hadn't noticed my shock. "Surely Mom and Dad would prefer to live with me, their real daughter, especially since I can give them grandchildren. You and Scott should move out soon, so we can move in." Karen spoke with a smug sense of entitlement, all while stroking her growing belly. It was clear that her plan was to move in with my in-laws and have them take care of her kids. "Just look at how happy Dad and Mom are to be with their grandkids," she said, gesturing toward my in-laws, who were clearly struggling to keep up with the rowdy children. I couldn't see any joy on their faces, but I knew arguing with Karen would be pointless. My frustration had been simmering for a long time, her constant jabs at my infertility, her dumping her children on my kind in-laws. But now, her audacity to demand that we leave the home Scott had built was the final straw. As I thought about what could be done, a plan formed in my mind. I quietly agreed. "Okay, we'll move out." Karen, thrilled with my compliance, eagerly set a date for our move and her move-in. She left her kids behind as usual, but I felt an unexpected sense of relief. This was my chance to finally sever ties with her. Time passed, and the day came for Karen and her family to move into the duplex Scott had built. As I wondered how their move was going, my phone rang. It was Karen. The moment I answered, I was greeted by Karen's screeching voice. "What the hell is this? Why haven't you moved out your stuff? There's no room for our things. And where are Dad and Mom supposed to go?" Scott, his parents, and I had left the house, but we hadn't taken all of our furniture. Karen was furious, and I calmly replied, "The decision to move was so sudden that we only managed to move ourselves for now. Your in-laws are staying with us." "This is outrageous," Karen snapped, her anger as sharp as ever. "What's outrageous?" I shot back. "Is that you and your husband are trying to move into the house Scott built without our consent. It's also outrageous that you keep dumping your kids on us while you go off and have fun, even though we've told you repeatedly how hard it is to manage them." "That's not the point right now. Can I just throw out the furniture I don't like? If you're really planning to move in, then sure, do whatever you want, but are you sure about this?" "What are you talking about?" Karen asked, irritated. It was time to break the news. "Can you and your husband even afford the mortgage on that house? It's a duplex and quite large, so the payments are steep." Of course, this was all a lie. My earlier agreement to let her move in had been a lie too. There was no way I was going to let Karen take over the home Scott had built for us. "The furniture is still there because Scott, his parents, and I are currently on vacation at Yellowstone National Park," I continued. The truth was that the house was fully paid for with the savings of Scott, his parents, and me. There was no mortgage, but my lie was enough to scare Karen. Scott and his parents were in on the plan too. When Karen demanded to speak with Scott, he took the phone, adopting a mischievous tone as he repeated the lie about the mortgage. Over the phone, Karen apparently started crying, realizing she couldn't afford the payments. After Scott gently suggested that they could still back out, Karen finally decided to return to her previous home with her husband Rob and their children. We assured her that we'd be returning to the duplex ourselves, solidifying the end of her takeover attempt. Upon returning to our home, which had narrowly avoided being taken over by Karen, she immediately stormed over, seething with anger. "You never told us there was still a mortgage. Why did you keep that from us?" she yelled. I calmly replied, Because you never asked. Karen's face flushed with even more anger. The kids were so happy, thinking this house would be ours. You've disappointed them too. That's why you can't get pregnant. You should make up for it by properly taking care of the kids. Playing with them is no big deal and better than doing nothing. As Karen continued her rant, something unexpected happened. My usually quiet mother-in-law stood up and slapped Karen across the cheek. Everyone, including me, was shocked. My mother-in-law, normally so composed, had reacted with such force. She then addressed Karen with an uncharacteristically sharp tone. You can't even handle that no big deal task of playing with your own kids. Yet you dump it all on Emma. You were planning to move into this duplex just to force your childcare responsibilities onto us, weren't you? We would have been willing to help if you were genuinely struggling. But who wants to help a daughter who shirks her parenting duties and acts all high and mighty? Leave this house immediately and don't ever come back. Karen, now half crying, pleaded, aren't you on my side, Mom? I'm your real daughter, aren't I? My always quiet father-in-law then spoke up, his voice laced with disappointment. It's because you are our real daughter that this is so disgraceful. I even feel guilty for raising such a selfish child. I've heard from Scott how you've been mocking Emma for her difficulties in having a baby. That's something no one should ever do. Karen shot a furious glare at me. Feeling a mix of pity and relief, I opened the front door for her. As both your mother and father have said, please leave. I won't be helping with your childcare anymore, so you'll have to manage on your own. You people are monsters, Karen screamed as she left the house in tears, and from that day on, she never set foot in our home again. Later, when Scott was at work, he received a call from Karen. It was hard for him to understand her through her sobs, but it became clear that her household was in serious financial trouble. Karen had been spending lavishly on beauty salons and manicures, while Rob had been wasting money on lottery tickets. With their savings nearly depleted, Karen had seen moving into the duplex as a way to avoid paying rent and utilities. Desperate, she asked Scott, who earns well above the average income, for financial help. But Scott couldn't forgive her for mocking my infertility. He told her bluntly that all they needed to do was cut back on beauty treatments and lottery tickets. But Karen refused, crying that she didn't want to. There was no way Scott could financially support such arrogance, even if she was his real sister. Eventually, Rob ran out of money to buy lottery tickets and had to take on a side job in addition to his main job just to make ends meet. Karen, too, lost the funds she used to spend on beauty treatments. She had always been well put together, but a few months after falling out with Scott, she was almost unrecognizable when we bumped into her. In fact, Scott had to point out, "Isn't that Karen?" before I realized it was her. Despite everything, her kids seemed lively and happy around her, which was a relief. And then, the most incredible thing happened. I found out I was pregnant with twins. I couldn't hold back my tears when the doctor gave us the news. Scott, who was with me, also cried out of pure joy as we shared this precious moment. My in-laws were over the moon, thrilled that we were finally going to have the children we had always longed for. Though I haven't mentioned it to Scott, I can't help but think that being free from the stress Karen caused might have contributed to me finally getting pregnant. When I think about how Scott and my in-laws stood by me instead of Karen, I feel nothing but gratitude. Because of their unwavering support, I was blessed with 2 new lives. Now, all I wish for is that the babies in my belly are born healthy and happy.